Hey, what's up, everybody? Craig Perra here from Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions, a podcast designed to help you create healthy sexuality and a great life. And this is a podcast for you partners out there who are listening, who want to better understand your husband's journey and committed to a healing journey for yourself. Today, we have a very special guest, Barbie Moreno from Wounds to Wisdom. We met on LinkedIn. I loved her perspective on mental health, and we had a few great chats. And I'd like to welcome you to the program, Barbie.
Thank you. Very excited to be here and see what we chat about.
Yeah, let's jump in. So, first, I always want to hear about people's story. I'm always fascinated when people have done something like me, where they went from an executive job to now helping people. And you got those blinders on. Your title is your identity.
Mm.
Until that identity is shattered, at least in the case for me. um, Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to um, from where you were to Wounds to Wisdom, which I absolutely love, that perspective.
Yeah, so I think shattered's a great word, right? So starting off, everybody goes back to their childhood for the most part. Childhood, abusive father, alcoholic, left my mother. My mother was not able to mentally take care of us. She was emotionally checked out. She did her best, right? She dealt with what she could, but I became an overachiever because of that. And I earned my way into a very prestigious position at the private bank and was doing really, really well. And then I got pregnant with my son, which my husband and I were super excited about. But when I had him, I had postpartum depression. And when I let my work know that I needed a little bit more time off, they said, yeah, no problem. And then the next day gave away my office that was a very prestigious office that I'd earned to a male, basically saying because of the fact that he didn't have children, didn't need to take time off from work, that he could have my office space. And
Ouch.
yeah. And so, of course, thinking that possibly couldn't be legal, found out it is. Your job is protected, but your office is not protected. And people might say, like, oh, who cares about an office? But where I was at, that was like a badge of honor. Um, it showed how, I mean, I was at the very top of the food chain as far as what I was doing. And that office space was just like a trophy, right? So I went back to work because I thought the longer I'm out, the worse it's going to get. And I never dealt with my postpartum depression. And 4 years later, had to go on medical leave because I literally lost my mind and physically couldn't take it anymore. And I needed to learn to heal. I needed to figure out why was I such an overachiever and why was my identity tied so much to my work and how do I get better? And from there, I just learned that a lot of my stuff was rooted in my survival mode as a child and that my biology and my brain had changed to make me this type of person. And so I needed to undo it. And that's how I got from wombs to wisdom.
And how did you undo it? Can you explain that journey and transition from corporate executive to mother
Mm.
to depression and realizing how much you don't have control over? What was your process? And was this your first time in self-help, seeing a therapist? What help me understand that journey a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up in a space where you saw therapists. And
That's
so
weak.
actually, right. And when they diagnosed me with postpartum depression, I didn't even really understand what that meant. Mental health was never discussed in my family. And so I was like, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that? And then they start sending you to a therapist and they start putting you on medication. You don't even know what they're putting you on or what it's all about. And all of the medication would actually make me significantly worse. And so I had to start doing my own research on what is this stuff that they're doing to me. And the insurance that I had at the time, literally every time I would go in, it would be a new doctor because the other doctor had not, had quit. And it was an HMO type of insurance. And so I didn't even have control over my health care and my mental health. And so I figured there has to be a better way. I've always been somebody who looks outside of the box. And so I started learning about other techniques about mindfulness. Meditation was a big thing for me, and I am one that completely understands when people say they can't meditate because they have monkey mind where their mind just keeps wandering. But you can learn. And so I just started off very much in that space. Tried breath work, which sounded like very woo-wooey to me.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you that it really does work. So I tried all of these things that were outside of the box to figure out how can I help myself. And at the same time, I just decided to pay cash because I had the money. I went to a decent doctor, decent therapist, did things like EMDR, which is like for those don't know, it's like a treatment for people with trauma where they do like eye movement to help you desensitize from the experiences, not forget them, but desensitize. It was an extremely long journey. My son is going to be 11 in April, and it's still a journey.
How did you, what was it like accepting the diagnosis of postpartum depression? Because I remember having absolutely all the symptoms of clinical depression,
Mhm.
but it took me a while to get my arms around that there's something else happening here beyond me doing a poor job turning that frown upside down.
Mhm.
And in corporate, we're taught to be resilient, solve problems, suck it up. The buck stops with you. You're the boss. You're responsible. What was it like embracing that reality that you were experiencing something that in that moment you did not have control over?
I didn't embrace it. I avoided it. I felt like a complete failure. Like somehow I caused my postpartum because I was weak and I needed to man up, being a woman, but man up and just suck it up, buttercup. And so I actually didn't embrace it until I had no choice. And when I say I had no choice, my liver was failing, my kidneys were failing, my cortisone levels were super like high. Like I was physically, when you see it physically, that's when I think that you really have no choice but to address it. When it's mental, we don't think about mental health like we think about physical health. If you go break a bone, you go get it fixed. But when you're mentally dealing with things, we tend to think of ourselves as failures. I don't know about you, but I
Mm,
absolutely thought I was like, I can fix this. Like, what's wrong with me? I don't, I don't understand why I can't get this better. I don't understand why I can't just push through it like I could push through everything else. So I didn't accept it for 5 years.
wow.
And then that
Wow.
just made it worse, right?
Stuffing it down,
Hmm.
ignoring it,
Hmm.
grinding through it.
Hmm.
And so when you finally made that step to do what the doctors were telling you to do, to take the medication and take the therapy, looking back, what was missing? And the reason you exist is to your whole story is like, wait a minute, I'm not getting something that I needed with medicine, with traditional therapy. Why didn't it work for you?
Because deep down inside, I still didn't feel like I was worthy. So you can take pills, which I'm not, I absolutely believe that some people need medication, but I think they over medicate people.
Me
Um,
too. I
yeah,
agree that same. Some people need it.
yeah.
A lot of people are taking it when they should be focused on other things.
Yeah, when they can use other tools, right? Like medication is a tool, but it's not the answer to everything. And you still, even medicated, you still have to do the work. But ultimately, it comes from a space of like, I go back to my childhood because almost everything goes back to our childhood, right? I
Yes.
was not seen, not heard. I had to make myself small to stay safe, right? To stay safe. If I was seen and heard, then you could be physically hurt. And so you make yourself small. And so when you're not seen and you're not heard, it doesn't matter if you're trying to overachieve in the world to prove yourself. Inside, you still feel like you're not worthy. And so it was the discovery of me just through, I think, looking at my children and knowing, like looking at them, they just play naturally. My son thinks he like deserves the world, right? And so you look at them and you see them just be so pure and you're like, why can't I do that for me? Why is it that, he can just come up and ask for something and feel safe, but I wouldn't dare ask for something for myself? And then that comes from a sense of not being worthy.
Yeah, like you, Barbie, I learned so much through my children. And
Hmm.
I learned what I was doing different. than my parents, and then later on learn why I was doing things different. But I saw, as time went on, I began to appreciate the impact of my childhood, although resistant to embracing that impact for a long time. Stop blaming your parents, suck it up, move on. Don't be like one of those people in therapy. What,
Right.
what was that like for you? Were you aware, always aware that you were in an abusive home, or did you awaken to that reality?
No, my home was extremely abusive. You couldn't not be aware. What I wasn't aware of is how it changed me, how it changed my brain, right? Because it actually changes the way that your brain forms. And then how it changed my everyday decisions, how I showed up in the world, whether I could say no or yes. Your podcast being on sexuality and addictions and stuff like that, I was molested very young,
Mm.
by multiple people.
Oh,
And
horrible.
you carry that with you too, because then your boundaries have been violated, your body has been violated. And so you don't even think that you're safe in your own body, right? And then we talked about this, before, but when you've been sexually molested and you're trying to prove yourself, you almost feel like that is you as a female, you almost can use sexuality to your advantage in the corporate world, knowing that if you're a little bit flirty, you might get a little bit more attention and you may get business. But then it's also like this thing where you're like, I don't want to do that, but that's how the system works. And so it's this crazy like back and forth with yourself and guilt and shame. And if I was very attractive, and so people, men would be inappropriate with me, but I didn't know how to say like don't touch me or hold me that long. I didn't have any boundaries on myself because nobody had ever taught me that it was okay to say no to my body being violated.
Wow, wow, wow. And what was the pivotal moment from your journey that crystallizes the essence of your this resilience coaching philosophy? Tell me what was the yeah, tell me about that.
Mhm. So I was my story that you'll hear in my speaking is I was asking myself over and over again, what's wrong with me? And this is when I was on medical leave. I couldn't get better. I was cooking dinner one night and I was just still asking myself, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I get better? And I just had a moment where I was like, it's not what's wrong with me, it's what happened to me that made me this way. Like what actually happened to me in my life. I wasn't broken, I was injured and I could fix it. But it was almost just like an aha moment after just literally asking myself all of the time, most of my life, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And I'd actually read a book by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. I know some people are not fans of her, but this book is amazing. It's called What Happened to You. And that book, because it goes through the scientific and the emotional and all that stuff, allowed me to understand that I was the way that I was and I couldn't heal because I didn't have the tools. And so that book actually changed everything for me.
And tell me the authors again in the title.
Yep, it's Dr. Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey, and it's titled What Happened to You?
Mm, mm, mm. Now, in your experience with your clients, do you find that there's a high percentage of women who were either sexually abused,
Everyone.
object, or on the spectrum of sexual abuse, groomed, inappropriate? What's that like for your clients as they come to terms with that impact?
Well, I mean, statistically, 80, and I think that's a low number, 80% of women in some way, shape, or form have been sexually harassed or sexually abused, right? Overachieving women in particular usually have some sort of sexual abuse in their childhood because they're trying to prove their worth.
Wow, wow. What do you say to these women as they're navigating their journey?
That what happened to you as a child, or even, like a lot of this stuff will happen in the corporate work environment, that those things that happened to you shifted your perspective on the world, which is why you showed up the way that you showed up. And maybe not all of that was bad. Maybe you did very well in business, but if you really never truly heal from that, you can never be your full transformational, full essence, right? So where are we showing up in reaction instead of actually perceiving what's going on, knowing what's going on, and making the best decision to ourselves? How are we reacting to things? So I teach them to see that. And sometimes it's hard, right?
Very.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like an overachiever and you have all this outside praise and awards. Like, I don't know how many of those stupid plaques and awards that I had sitting in my office. So we're rewarded for being overachievers. So as long as you're getting your big paychecks and you're getting all of these different awards, you think, well, I couldn't possibly have that much wrong with me because I'm getting at least, this kind of recognition. But then how come when I go home and I don't have that recognition that I've tied my identity to, how come I don't feel good enough?
Yeah. And that's magnified for the women that we work, Barbie, who's have that deep feeling of unworthiness,
Mhm.
and then their partner either cheats with
Yeah.
a person or has a secret sexual life with a computer.
Hmm.
Do you see that in your work a lot?
I do. Um, I can tell you this. I still haven't embraced myself in a positive sexual sense, because that's still traumatic, right? And so I also have noticed that women like me pick narcissistic partners who basically teach them, like gaslight them. And even though they're successful at work, at home, they're miserable. And also usually pick people who are either abusive or cheat, like you said, or don't honor their boundaries when they say, I don't want, I don't want you to be looking at porn. That's not real love. I don't want you to go to the strip clubs. They oftentimes will have in their home life a very disruptive home life, even though they're successful at work, because again, they don't feel the value to be able to set up those boundaries because they were violated. And so they allow people to violate them over and over and over again, and often pick partners that do that.
And it's even harder because there's such a common refrain around regarding the porn: boys will be boys. This is what men do. Do you find that there's a struggle that, well, yeah, of course they have this struggle. These women are trying to, they may not even understand why it's a boundary violation. So, from a religious perspective, they might call it a sin. They might know it's bad. But I bet you help them understand why it's bad and why is it impacting them, and how might that impact be connected to what happened in their childhood, so ultimately they can create the lives for themselves that they want.
And it's only bad if it goes against your morals and what you want, right? So
Yes.
I also know a lot of women who enjoy porn, or, are very fluid and open sexually, although some of them have their own trauma and they use it in that way. That's a whole different subject, right? But when you when something doesn't feel good for you and when it goes against what you truly believe, if you're with a partner who doesn't honor that, you have to ask yourself the question, why am I with somebody who doesn't honor something like this that's so important to me?
Yeah.
Why would I pick somebody, and why am I tolerating it? And it doesn't mean that you have to leave your spouse. I know you have your story where your wife stuck by your side. It doesn't mean that you have to leave your spouse, but if you don't address it, it's never going to get better.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't an interesting thing about me, Barbie, because I'm one of those narcissist,
Hmm.
borderline-ish, um, you know, low self-esteem, hyperreactive, highly sensitive.
Hmm.
Although I never would have identified that when I was a big fancy lawyer. And an interesting dynamic with Michelle and I at that low point when I was fired, tried to hurt myself, and like I told you when we talked, she stayed with me initially for the purpose of getting me back on my feet so I could get a job because she was a stay-at-home mom.
Mhm.
When she shifted that focus from me, and don't get me wrong, there was a lot to complain about, but when she started focusing on herself and
Mhm.
realizing, like, wait, this is the problem, it's not me,
Right.
and stepped out of, I call it disconnect. She doesn't like that word because she said she wasn't disconnecting, but to me it felt like she was disengaging from the
Mhm.
cycle that I had created and put her in. And it was that realization that told the narcissist in me the gig is up. Like
Mhm.
something's got to change. This is not like before, because I had done this before. This was different, and it was her growth that kicked me in the ass
Yep.
to finally do the work that I needed to do to heal. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, well, people will always treat you how you allow them to treat you, right?
Mhm.
But here's what happened. So your wife, she was strong enough to say to you, like, I'm not, when she disengaged, I'm not putting up with you anymore. Like, we're just done here. I'm not putting up with you. But if she doesn't have enough worth in herself to say, I'm not putting up with this, then you would have continued.
Right,
So she had to either through her own life and her experiences or through work like I do with my clients, she had to have the ability to stand up on her own 2 feet and say, look, dude, I'm not doing this anymore and I don't have to put up with you. I'm a gift. If you don't want this gift, go away.
right, right, right. Yeah, no, I remember the moment. It shattered that narcissistic wall
Hmm.
and broke it in a way that nothing had um, done in the past,
Yeah.
and it was, a big point of my, yeah, that kick in the ass that I needed.
Hmm.
Um, Tell me about shame.
Hmm.
When someone has been violated like you have, like I was as a child, and really I want to focus on the women who are listening now and the man who are listening to better understand their partners. That's a tough one. I don't even know if I have a question, but shame is the topic. And I'm, whatever you're inspired to share about that regarding your own journey, and then maybe how you help your clients navigate that. What comes up for you when you hear that word?
Well, shame is something that I think a lot of people carry. We're shamed by our social environment. We're shamed by our religions. We're shamed by our parents. We're shamed. I mean, shame is just something that's how people often control us, right? Is through shame. And so it goes back to forgiveness. Uh, so here's the thing. My parents did what they knew how to do. They did what was taught to them.
Right,
They did the best that they knew how to do. My mom is a huge shamer. She still shames to this day. But that's how she was taught. You get things done is through shame. So it's her communication style. And so now when I see her doing it, I don't personalize it because shame, if somebody's shaming you, it is because they have shame. It is not because you need to be shamed.
right.
And let's say you did something that you feel like was quote unquote shameful. You have to move on and forgive yourself. Sitting in it does you nothing. The guilt of it does nothing for you. It's done. Move on. Be better. Learn from it. If you don't learn from it, then it never served its purpose. But if you learn from it and you transform into something better, then it served its purpose.
Yeah, no, so important. And shame has so many different faces and impacts so many different area of our lives. What do you say to women, or maybe even what you learned on your journey around shame and sexuality? And by that, I contrast the male
Mhm.
upbringing and the female upbringing. And both, let's say in a religious home, got the sexual shame. Don't do it. Don't talk about it. You're going to burn in hell. It's bad. Yet there is a cultural narrative on the guy side to do it.
Mhm. If you're sexually active as a male, you're considered a stud. If you're sexually active as a female, you're considered a slut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so many of my male clients have so much dysfunction and so many challenges around intimacy and connection and love, sex and shame.
Mhm.
What I don't think the guys understand, or what certainly if they're doing the work, they're understanding how their partner's shame is almost a double whammy because they did not get that narrative.
Right, right. And so what happens is because they didn't get that narrative and they weren't allowed to honor themselves and explore sexually, all of the stuff that these guys are watching and engaged in is even worse
Even
because
worse.
it's like you want that, you're watching it, that turns you on. And so because I'm not that, I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or you don't want me and you don't desire me. And so now I'm shamed because I am not that person who's, on that video who's doing all this crazy stuff because that doesn't feel comfortable to me. Now I feel like, well, I can't fulfill your needs, right? Because I'm not
Yeah.
going to do those things. Or maybe I might try to please you, which makes me uncomfortable because that's not part of the way that I want to be. And so I might try to change myself to do the things that you are watching on these videos, which are completely not realistic for a relationship. But those different things, they're saying to a woman, like you're not desirable because you are not that girl that's wearing, high heels, walking around completely naked, letting every other guy, do a threesome with her or multiple different things. And so we're taught we can't express our sexuality, and then those that do express their sexuality, we're taught that we're not fulfilling for a man because we don't do the things that these other that they're watching, right? So there's this like conflicting message. This is what they want, but you can't do that because you're a good girl.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said that, I realized, I'm reinforcing how many different layers are. If you look at shame through it like a gemstone, there's so many different facets. The shame of not doing it the wrong way, not living up to expectations. And as you mentioned earlier, the most or one of the most important steps is reclaiming that body autonomy.
Mhm.
um how did you do that?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, well,
So it's
work in progress for me too. Let's get real here.
yeah,
That's
I'm
my intimacy disorder. It doesn't flow
right.
naturally in this direction. Flows naturally there, and I control it, and it's different, but
Mhm.
I'm just being real.
Yeah.
That directing that energy towards love and connection was and continues to be a challenge, that I'm much better at it, but it sounds like maybe there's some commonality here. Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's like you can work on your mindset, you can work on your relationship with money, you can work on all of these things, but there's something about the sexuality that is like almost like the last thing that you can work on. It's like we avoid it at the very last cost, right? Because especially with people with a past, it's extremely difficult to touch that subject. It's very sensitive. And so like when I say I'm still working on it, I have a wellness center and like tomorrow I have a doctor coming in and she's a sex therapist and she's going to talk with women about, teaching us how to say what we like and don't like. It is extremely uncomfortable for me
Mm,
to use words to tell somebody what I like and don't like. We're just taught to be quiet and be there to please the man. And
right.
so
Receive.
it's vulnerable to say
Or
that.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, yes,
Yeah, I mean, like,
yes.
what if I say something and like my husband's like, "What the hell?" You know what I mean? Or what if I say I don't like that and then he feels rejected,
Yeah.
right? So all of that is like vulnerability and you don't grow without being vulnerable, but it's a lot of work. And so how I'm working on it is I'm bringing in people as I'm bringing in people to teach other women, I'm using it as a tool to teach myself too.
Yeah, I know. Join the club. That's why I have people like you on my podcast so I can continue to learn and grow. And if you have a great experience with that
Mhm.
doctor, pass that person along.
Absolutely. And she is fantastic. So I will
Wonderful.
give you her information. She's absolutely fantastic.
And for the women listening now, say to yourself, I like blank sexually,
Mhm.
and see how it feels.
It will
It's
feel shameful.
shameful.
Mhm.
Like just the mere
Mhm.
admission, grown women, successful mothers,
Mhm.
challenge after challenge that they've overcome. And I think we're, I guess, giving a voice to the problem because we're not solving it, but acknowledging how deep it is in your body. And
Mhm.
there's a reason people get arrested when they're older for doing things to people who are younger,
Mhm.
because it is so massively impactful.
Mhm.
And, you know, and so often it's a family member
Right.
or someone close to them,
Right.
and stuff happens,
Yeah.
let it go.
Right.
That's a deep, deep, deep wound.
Right. Well, what that teaches you, especially when families know about it and they cover it up, it teaches you that that you don't matter.
Right.
Right? So that you don't matter. The other thing on the sexuality is what I notice with women is so they either are like me or they go the opposite extreme, almost like with the career. So they go overly sexual because they're trying to prove that it's not affecting them, or that's how they oftentimes it can, just like for a man, it can become an addiction, right? So
Right.
there are, it's not that there's not, it's less than men, but there's a group of women who become completely convinced that they own their sexuality when in true honest they don't own their sexuality. They're just trying to work through life through their sexuality in a different way, like people might use alcohol or drugs.
Yeah, it shuts down or it explodes.
Yeah.
Often on those two extremes when you have that trauma. Now, forgiveness is very important to you.
Mm.
And can you tell me why and share with me your journey of forgiveness?
Yeah, well, forgiveness is important because the Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And we have to remember that for the most part, I don't currently talk to my father, but I have forgiven him, but yeah, I also don't allow him in my life because
Mm,
he's not healthy. So I think that people think like when you forgive that you have to continue to allow these people to violate you and be in your life. No, you forgive them for what they did so that you can move forward. Who cares about them? You forgive them what they did so that you're not stuck in that thought process of being victimized and things like that. And understand that whatever their journey is, it's not personal to you, right? So if we personalize it and we make their journey our journey, then we always become the victim of it. So you have to forgive them so you can move forward, but you also have to forgive yourself because a lot of us, we make mistakes all of the time. And if
yeah,
we don't let it go, we can't move forward. We have to let it go. And it's okay to let it go. And it's okay to make a mistake because if you didn't make mistakes, why are you here? If you're perfect, there's no purpose.
right, right, right. And the thing about forgiveness is a lot of people get hung up on, I can't forgive that person for what that person did. And what you're saying is forgiveness is an act of kindness, empathy, and love for you. It's a selfish act just to blow it up a little bit. It's forgiveness is for you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, forgiveness is 100% for you. It's not for the
Yeah,
other person.
yeah,
And you can forgive somebody who has not changed because if they haven't changed, that's their story. But do you want to sit in their story and do you want to allow them to control you and take up space? I always, because sometimes, still to this day, I'll have like a story going on in my mind. And then I'm like, why am I letting this take up space in my head? It's so stupid,
right,
right?
right,
You
right.
have to let it go so you can move forward. It doesn't mean that it wasn't wrong. It doesn't mean that it wasn't okay. It doesn't mean that it didn't hurt you. It doesn't mean that, that they shouldn't be or do better. But what it means is that you're worthy of moving forward with your life and not staying in that story.
What are the prerequisites for forgiveness? So people hear the words and okay, I'm gonna let it go. But as you know, it comes in layers. And
Mhm.
the other thing I've learned about forgiveness is at least for me, it's not a one-time act.
No.
It's something that I've had to do over and over again. For example, when a shame hit comes, or you think about something that happened, and so it's this ongoing process of letting go. But before someone can forgive, they're holding on to that as this protection
Mhm.
to remind them of the pain and reinforce the boundaries. And
Right.
um, what needs to happen before that deeper level of forgiveness can occur?
A couple of things. So one, you don't just jump right in, right? You don't go like, "Oh, I'm going to forgive the guy that molested me when I was a kid." Like, how about we start with forgiving the teller at the bank who was rude? Something small. But you really can't even forgive anybody else till you forgive yourself. So the very first step is forgiving yourself. So what I like to do is I will write down the things that I feel like I need to forgive myself for. And then I'll go through them and be like, I forgive myself for that. Like even silly, stupid things. Like maybe I told my son, like, get out of my office because I was busy working and he was bugging the living crap out of me, you know? Then I have to go back and say, look, like I forgive myself for that. I don't want to talk to him that way. I'm going to work on it. And also, like, I was frustrated, so I forgive myself for that, right? So, starting small, working on forgiving yourself. I really believe you cannot forgive other people until you forgive yourself.
I agree with that 100%. Back to forgiveness is a selfish act of kindness for you,
Yes.
for you. What is your favorite quote or mantra that you live by, and how does that resonate with you? How do you use that to fuel your journey?
It's what I said earlier, Maya Angelou. When you know better, you do better. And it fuels me because it reminds me that when I can forgive myself when I make mistakes, as long as I feel like as long as I learn from them, right? As long as I use them as a tool. But it also allows me to understand that judging other people does me no good because I don't, one, know their story. I don't know what they've done to self-heal or if they don't even know how to self-heal. And so I look at people and just say, if they knew better, they would do better.
Right,
Again, you're not excusing their actions and just saying like they get to walk all over you or they get to hurt other people. If you commit a crime, you should go to jail for your crime. But you also hopefully will learn from it so that you don't continue to do these things.
right. Here's why I did that. Here's the my dysregulation, my poor coping strategies, my unmet needs, my family of origin trauma.
Mhm. But see, you can't even get there unless you understand why it all started, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and also, I feel like it's extremely important for people to understand that biologically your brain changed when you had an environment or a situation where it felt like it needed to go into survival mode. It physically changed. So you have to physically change it back. How do you physically change it back? Just like you physically change your body back. If you don't ever go to the gym and you start going to the gym, you don't start by lifting 500 pounds. You start by lifting 5 or 10 pounds. So when you go back to change your mind, it's a muscle just like that. You start with little bitty things and then work your way up. And then one day you're going to be a weightlifter in your mind and you're going to have these neuroplasticity and you're going to be able to do these things automatically. But in the beginning, treat it just like going to the gym. You start small.
I love what you said. So I'm a huge fan of Kaizen goals. They're critically important for so many different reasons, small attainable goals. I love what you said about practicing forgiveness with the teller.
Hmm.
And I think it's easy for people to get stuck on the big things. And often that's the goal for a lot of people in therapy is to pursue
The big.
that big emotional catharsis moment where the sky opens and then fireworks come. But the thing about fireworks, Barbie, they're big and powerful and they're awesome, and I hope everybody experiences them, but they fade.
Hmm. They
They
fade.
they ha- they haven't developed that muscle. Does that?
Yeah. And the thing is, when they fade, then you feel like a failure because you're like,
Yes.
wait, I'm right back to start, square one. How come I'm back to square one? And so when you start small, it's like a gradual change, right? But it's also to say you don't get like, it's not like you don't get mad. I was with my daughter today. She was getting her blood drawn. And they couldn't figure out the insurance and they send this guy in there and he's a complete jerk. And I wanted to rip his head off for about 2 minutes. You know what I mean? And then I had to come back and go like, that's not going to solve anything, although it might feel good for a minute.
Yes, it would.
But then if I left that in my mind and the rest of the day I thought about how annoying that whole situation was and how frustrating it is, it would have ruined my entire day. So once that situation was resolved, I had to let it go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the mind, right? You learn to let things go. And that's how you forgive too.
And you practice.
You
It's a
practice.
it's a skill.
Mhm. And practice small. Like you said, the teller, the guy at the grocery store, the person who cut you off.
That's such an important lesson, and it feels so trivial maybe in the moment with these
Mhm.
little things, but I really want to reinforce for people listening how important that is, because you read a lot about identity, Barbie. It's the most important thing, and identity is the deepest level of change. How do you create that? And
Mhm.
that's the question that I've been having fun answering with clients. And to your point, it starts with those little itty bitty teeny tiny that feels so insignificant and trivial, but you're strengthening that muscle.
And so you have to develop tools for that, right? So you practice, like my daily practice is journaling. And I don't journal for an hour. I journal for like literally less than 5 minutes, right? But I do a gratitude journal and give 5 things that I'm grateful for because it trains my mind to be grateful. My children, before they go up to bed at night, we say, "What are your 5 gratefuls today?" Because it trains your mind to be grateful. So then when you're throughout your day, you're looking for things to be grateful for to talk about at night. And so it's the same thing in anything, in forgiveness or in self-love. I used to brush my teeth and say, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you," because I needed to remind myself that I do love myself, right? So it's
Yeah.
these little tools, and these tools are the things you get from people like me and you and who have gone through it and have worked through it. And so you take what works for you and you leave the rest.
Yeah. No, so true, Barbie. What Anything else you want to leave with the women who are listening to this? And we'll get to, how people can contact you in a second. But is there anything else important that we didn't cover, or a message that you have for the women who are listening to this podcast, angry about their partner's porn use, the lies and the betrayal? Um, what do you want to say to those ladies?
I want to acknowledge their pain and say, "I'm sorry that happened to you." Sometimes we just want to be heard, right? And every time
Yeah,
people try to give us excuses and tell us tools and all of these different things, all we really want is somebody to hear us. So I want to say, "I'm sorry that happened to you."
yeah. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna do this again, Barbie. How do people find you on the web? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Mhm.
I know you work with people. Tell us a little bit about your practice and what you do, and then we'll get into the deets of how they can find you. And everyone who's listening, you'll see in the comments or the description, we're gonna have all of Barbie's links. She's got a Facebook group. Her From Wounds to Wisdom program is very successful. Tell us what you do and how people can find you.
So I speak, so I'm a speaker. And so if anybody knows of anybody who's doing events or whatever and feels like this would be helpful, they're welcome to reach out to me on that. But mostly I say I have a 30-day course and it's not, it's the beginning step. I don't think that people should go into one-on-one coaching until they've done some tool building because one one-on-one coaching is more expensive, but you need to sit down and figure out what's going on with you. So that's why I put together a 30-day course because it gives you the basics so that you can kind of understand yourself before you go into some sort of coaching or really big change, right? So people can contact me on my website, which is my name, Barbie, spelled like the Barbie doll, Barbie, Moreno, Moreno.com. That has all my Instagram, my Facebook. It will be loaded up with my course actually relatively soon. And I would say that's the best contact point for me and to see what I offer. And just a side note, just for those for shits and giggles, my husband's name is Ken, so we are Ken and Barbie. So
Oh my gosh.
just remember Barbie, and then that will be easier.
Yep, I love it. I love it. And you also have a podcast. What is the name of that podcast? And I'm going to include the links for that too.
Yep. So that's From Wounds to Wisdom. It's on YouTube. It's wherever you stream, it's on there. And that one is just me talking to people about their stories and how they went from here to there and how it'll give you great tools, right? That's what we're looking for, is just tools.
Yep, yep. I love the practical nature of your approach, Barbie. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. And listeners, stay tuned. I'm going to be on Barbie's podcast soon. I look forward to sharing that with all of you. Thank you so much for being here, Barbie. From wounds to wisdom. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, that concludes this podcast, Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. Again, I'm your host, Craig Perra. If you or someone you love is struggling with compulsive sexual behavior and you connected with people need practical solutions that are actually going to deliver results in their lives, visit mindfulhabithelp.com. Thanks for all the love and support. See you on the next podcast. Embrace your power of choice and feed the right wolf. See you soon. Bye, everybody.